All right, so next I wanted to prove to you that we can actually use the variable that we created up here and that we're assigning a value to, and the value is the title of the button that was tapped as an observable. So here I'm going to create a new observable for this one, predefined greeting observable. And that's going to be an observable that emits strings. So it's going to be the same type, actually the same generic type. And the way how we obtain it is just by calling as observable object greeting property. And just to prove to you that this actually works, I'm going to quickly demonstrate this by subscribing to the observable rather than binding it. I'm passing in a closure where we're receiving a string. I'm just going to print the string for now to demonstrate to you that what's happening is that when we click on a button now, we're actually going to print the title of the button to the console. All right, so here's the simulator, and when I click the buttons, we are seeing that the title of the button is displayed in the console. All right, so this was the last missing piece, because basically what should be displayed up here in the greeting observables is dependent on 4 different pieces of data. The first piece of data is whether we want to use the buttons or the text field to generate the greeting. And based on this information, we're going to either take the string from the custom greeting text field or the last title of the buttons that have been pressed for the greeting, and then we're appending the name of the person that we want to greet to the greeting. And we can do all of that by combining the 4 observables that represent these 4 pieces of data in one call. And again, how we're going to do this is by calling combine latest on the observable type. So observable combine latest can take 4 different observables. So here I actually have 5, but this won't matter. I'm just going to delete the 5th one. So the first one is the state observable that receives the information whether we want to use the text field or the buttons. The second one is the custom greeting observable that gives us the string from the text field. The next one is the predefined greeting observable that we just defined and where we get the information for the last button title. And then the last one is the name observable, of course, because we need the name to create the final string. And then I'm going to pass the trailing closure. So what are the types of all these values that are being emitted? So if we check the state observable, we see that this is the state. So the first argument that is being passed into this closure is the state. The second one from the custom greeting observable is actually of type optional string because it's coming from a text field. So this is going to be the custom greeting and it's of type string optional. The predefined greeting, on the other hand, is actually of type string because the predefined greeting observable, as we see here, emits strings directly. And then the name, again, is of type optional string because we receive the value from a text field and we see that the type that we receive there is of type optional string. So now, based on the state, we have to decide which of the 2 greetings that we have available here we want to use. So either we want to use the custom greeting when the state is equal to use text field. So we are going to return the custom greeting. I'm not going to bother, just force unwrapping it here, adding a comma, and then the name. And then we also have the case where we should use the buttons. And in this case, we are returning the predefined greeting plus the name. All right, let's go ahead and store this in an intermediate variable. Let's see, I must have made a mistake at some point. State observable is the first one, custom greeting observable, and then we've got this. Let me add the return value, because sometimes it's just a type issue with RxSwift and we can get rid of it by explicitly declaring all the types. And indeed, it was just an issue with the types here. So by explicitly adding the type of the closure, we can get rid of this error. Let's store the result of this call in an intermediate variable. So final greeting observable, I'm going to call it. And that, of course, is an observable of type string. And now we can use this final greeting observable and bind it to the greeting label greetings label rx.text property. And in fact, because we did that before up here and we already had greeting with name observables and binding to the greetings label, we can delete this code again because we don't need it anymore. And now I have to finally add the binding to the dispose bag. Oops, so I'll have to put this on this line. And now we should be good. Let's run the application. Let's actually also delete this subscription here. I just created it for demo purposes. Final greeting observable. We're binding it to an add disposable. That looks okay. Let's just run the app. Add disposable too. All right, let's run the application, and now everything should work. And remember how in the beginning I told you that usually when using FRP, we also write less code, and less code usually also means fewer bugs. Well, here we have the proof of that. We wrote the same application bug-free, and we basically wrote the same application within 70 lines of code, whereas the imperative version had around 120 lines of code, if I recall correctly. So we've got much less code, much less opportunity for us to make mistakes. We've covered all the different scenarios, and the code is much more declarative, so it reads much nicer. And just by reading the code is actually much more it's much more understandable what the code is actually doing, because it's more descriptive. We're telling the code what to do, not how to do it anymore. And that's just a nicer way to write this app.